Donald Trump and the U.S. economy is being told to F off by Canada and Mexico, who aren't scared about the trade war that Donald Trump is threatening. I've already covered Claudia Sheinbaum, president of Mexico, and her strongman tactics that are working against Donald Trump. Now let's cover Canada here on Legal AF. I'm Michael Popok. I sit at the intersection of law, politics, and sometimes trade here on Legal AF. Take a minute and help us continue our march. We're trying to get to 500,000 and over the next 30 days of free subscribers, and with your help, we will. Let's talk about Canada. Oh, Canada. They are firing back. They're led by people like Justin Trudeau, who I think he's more dangerous now that his government has crumbled and he needs to leave than he was before. He seems to have gotten renewed vim and vigor against Donald Trump. And what they're doing, whether it's him or the Ontario province premier, Doug Ford, what they're doing is they're exploiting Donald Trump's lack of understanding of the quote unquote trade war or trade deficit between between Canada and the US. Let me put it on the table first. There is a small, minor, it's almost infinitesimal, de minimis, not material trade deficit between U.S. and Canada on goods. Trade deficits are measured in two parts, which Donald Trump doesn't seem to understand. Goods, which includes raw materials, natural resources, and electricity, oil, and power, that type of thing. It's all covered under goods, and everything else is services. So the contract that Elon Musk just signed with Ontario, which I'll talk about in a minute, for Starlink to bring internet access to rural Ontario, that's a service. Consultancy agreements by technology companies in America to provide technology, right? Not the product, but the service of technology, whether it be the internet or artificial intelligence. Those are services. Law firms, services. Management, consulting firms, services. You see where we're going with that? That's services. On the services side, America is ahead in the relationship. Forget the war. The relationship, which is almost $1 trillion between Canada and Mexico. We're ahead on services. We provide more services, as I've just defined them, than Canada provides us. There are some good Canadian consulting firms and good technology firms, but we got more, obviously. On the good side, there is a slight delta, a slight differential where Canada is ahead, mainly because what they sell us is more high priced than what we sell them. Because what they're selling us, as I said before, goods includes oil and electricity and natural resources and rare earth minerals and metals and all the stuff that we use in our own manufacturing process. Those are, if you're going to be on one side of the trade, that's a good side to be on. And we pay for it. They're our number one trading partner. I think 17 states alone in America, the number one trading partner is Canada or Ontario. So we're ahead in services. They're ahead in goods. And when you net it out, I don't know, there's like a $50 billion delta between two countries that trade almost $1 trillion of economy. It's very small. And it really shows you Donald Trump both doesn't understand the world economy or the U.S.'s place in it, or what makes the U.S. economy hum. And it's just fake. He just wants to be, I'm going to drive Canada and Mexico back to the bargaining table. He's the one that signed the deal with them last time. Every time he takes office, he signs a deal with Canada and Mexico. They capitulate minorly. He capitulates bigger, and then he declares victory. Like in Mexico, I'm giving them a 30-day delay. Yeah, Claudia Sheinbaum was able to negotiate in Mexico that they were going to get that the U.S. is going to stop the flow of illegal guns into Mexico. Sounds like a pretty good get by Claudia Sheinbaum. Back to Canada. So Canada looked at the same equation that I just outlined and said, they're up on services, aren't they? We're up on goods. How do we balance it? How do we fight back in a trade war? I know. Why don't we rip up contracts that we just signed with service companies like Elon Musk's Starlink? So we got an announcement by Doug Ford, who's been on the Midas Touch Network before, of course, who said, you know what? We've got a $70 million contract to provide internet service to rural Ontarians. We're ripping it up. We're not going to be in business with a U.S. government that is hell-bent on destroying our economy in Canada. or the world economy for that matter. So he literally said, we're just ripping it up and let them come after us. So that's what's going to happen in Canada. They're going to nail our technology companies providing services, management services, AI services, technology, IT services, law firms, consulting firms, anything, brokerages. There's a lot of cross-border activity between the US and Canada. Yeah. I worked for a company, for instance. I usually would say that remains nameless. I worked for a company where the person that ran the company is now in Donald Trump's cabinet. So I know something of what I speak in terms of the experience, the industries. And companies like brokerages and trading houses, or what they call in the UK, broking, stock, equities, bonds, energy, currency, whatever the trading desk is, they straddle often the Canadian-US border with offices on both sides. That flow of money coming back and forth between the parent companies and the Canadian subsidiaries could get taxed at 25% now in terms of a tariff. And because Donald Trump didn't give the companies enough time to organize themselves, they haven't had time to find ways to get around that. I'll give you an example. When Brexit, when UK decided in its infinite wisdom they no longer wanted to be part of Europe and they wanted to go it alone, they exited. They announced they were exiting and they had a big vote. We all watched it. This is 5, 6, 7 years ago, and they decided to leave. But then they had to negotiate, sort of trade agreements with all the European countries because they were no longer part of the European Union. But that gave, in that 3 to 4 year period of transition, all of the US and other international companies were able to reorganize themselves to put themselves like, we'll put a subsidiary over in Ireland, or we'll put a subsidiary over in Europe. And then, we'll find a way to keep the money there and not send it back to the parent to avoid a tax. I mean, they arranged. There was no time to arrange Mexico and Canada. Donald Trump, sure, he was bragging about it during the campaign, but there was no time. It's not like Ford Motor Company figured out a way in Mexico in order to avoid the 25% tariff, or China using Mexico, that kind of thing. China also and Japan are, that's a little known fact. Japan and China are in Mexico and Canada, and they don't, they haven't had time to figure out a way to avoid that tariff either. So major disruption economically. And as now that Canada woke up, as I said they would, and focused on services for America, taxing that's going to hit the bottom line of American companies because they're going to be not competitive, or they're not going to want to pay that. Or if they want to pay it in order to provide that service as a tax, it's 25% less that goes to their bottom line. Just evaporates or goes to the American investor or the stockholder. It's a big hit on a balance sheet. This is that little bit of pain that Donald Trump keeps talking about. Well, with these policies of mine, there might be a little bit of pain, not for Donald Trump, not for the Trump family, not for the oligarchs in his cabinet, not for the average 1 billionaire that's in his cabinet. No pain for them. One of them, Howard Lutnick, said during his confirmation hearing, he's going to transfer or sell all of his billions and billions of dollars of companies because, quote, I've made enough money in my lifetime. Is that how you feel? Are you done making money? Can you be done making money? And have you made enough in your lifetime so that you could stop working? No. And is that who voted for Donald Trump? He ran on a populist message, yet he's surrounded by people who are so in the rarefied world and air of Mount Olympus that none of their policies matter to them. So when they implement them, they're completely insulated from it. That's an administration that doesn't care and is disconnected from the American people because they're in the upper 0.25% of wealth in America and they don't feel it. When was the last time somebody in that group pumped their own gas, bought their own eggs, went to a supermarket? Yeah? Called up a utilities company to get something reconnected or disconnected. Had a fight with customer service at something that was important to their life, been on the phone, not their executive assistant, not their personal assistant, not somebody on their team, but they themselves on the phone for an hour and a half or 5 hours trying to talk to a government agency or a debt collector. Yeah? Or an insurance company. When? How? And it's this level of disconnect that's ultimately going to tank the Trump administration. So they're already in the tank. Yeah. But Canada and the rest of the European world that is now consolidating against the United States, as I said, Donald Trump is the great uniter. It's just not America. He's uniting the rest of the world economies and leaders against us. How does that feel? America first, or as Stephen Miller liked to say, America is for Americans only. In a global world and a global economy that we need for export of our goods and services, our oil and gas, the things that we make, we're going to pull in our oars and just go it alone. Like this is the 1940s and Charles Lindbergh is running for office. Crazy. I'm sorry I got to do these hot takes, but I feel it's a public need, a public necessity. I'm glad you're here on Legal AF. Tune in every Monday for Chaos Monday, Financial Markets Chaos Monday. I don't blame the Ontario, Canada Premier Trudeau. Of course, they got to be ready for tomorrow and wait till you see what the markets do. I'll be back because now that he's imposing these 25% and 10% to China and all these little hidden ways it's going to impact negatively on our wallets and pocketbooks, right? Things you haven't even thought of. How many people, you can put it down in my notes here, how many people knew that Japan was using Mexico for some of their build of some of their electronics and other things? How many people knew that? Yeah? This isn't like I'm trying to stump you. It's more of this is how interconnected the world is. When Japan is building things in Mexico to sell to the United States, China is building things in Canada to sell to the United States, and vice versa. We can't go it alone, whether it's intelligence gathering or it's national security missions, right? Or it's the coalition of the willing we need when there's a major war somewhere or to protect the sovereignty of our NATO allies. We can't go it alone. Americans can't buy enough U.S.-made product to keep the GDP humming, to keep our economy humming. We can't just put up a wall. I know he loves these walls. We can't put a wall up around America and just consume our own product and expect to be a wealthy nation or expect to be a successful nation. I've said it before. It's a $3 trillion budget for America. $3 trillion. We're not going to collect that money from tariffs from Canada and Mexico. It's not going to cover $3 trillion. It's not going to cover $1 trillion. So Donald Trump's idea of, I know it sounds great on a bumper sticker, let's get rid of the Internal Revenue Service and let's use the External Revenue Service. Impossible. And he should be focusing not on this non-existent trade deficit between Canada and the United States. Trump and his brain trust, and that word is doing a heavy lift there. And I'm looking at you, Treasury Secretary, Trade Representatives, Head of Tariffs, Commerce Secretary, Secretary of State, and whoever else is in your Office of Management and Budget. I'm looking at all of you. Yeah. The amount of debt that Donald Trump put on this country for his first 4 years in office, and is still mounting and will mount more with him with tax cuts into the trillions and trillions of dollars is what matters. Yeah. The budget deficit matters. The national debt matters. We're not a healthy country when we have a debt and a deficit the way we do. Yeah. And that means we have to, it's a Ponzi scheme. U.S. is a little bit of a Ponzi scheme. I love our country. I love capitalism, but it's a little bit of a Ponzi scheme, right? We have to continue to make and grow the GDP of the economy and the pressure on everybody in order to pay the debt behind us before we generate one new dollar that can go for something like an investment in our country. We got to pay the debts. And that's our problem. No fiscal discipline, no financial discipline. Donald Trump's not financially or fiscally disciplined in his own household. Why would he expect that he would run the American government that way? Bankrupt 6 times. Only person in the world who found a way to bankrupt a casino where the house always wins. by a lot. Okay? $450 million fraud that he ran for just 10 years alone in New York, adjudged. You know, he inherited all of his wealth from his father. You know, it's easy to become a billionaire when your father gives you a $500 million head start 30, 40 years ago. I'd like somebody to track the actual Fred Trump money. And if it was just invested in like the stock market, how big would that nest egg be today versus what Donald Trump's done with it in terms of his finances? Anyway, we're here. You're here. Legal AF. I digress. But then again, the entire hot takes for me are usually some version of digression. Unfortunately, I see you seem to enjoy it. I like you being here. I am humbled by you being here. Take a moment, hit the subscribe button, and help this channel continue to grow. With your help, we'll make this durable, sustainable, this commentary, this analysis that you've come to enjoy. I'm glad I'm here for you. I'm Michael Popok. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.